And we are live. All right. So what's up, Founders fan? What's up, Founders community? So today we have a very, very special guest. My good friend, Greg, is talking from Twilio. Greg, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Absolutely. So welcome to the Founder Space. I know we've met a lot in at hackathons and at Twilio events, but this is your first time coming to the Founder Space.
This is my first time, I think, in Newark, not getting on an airplane.
Totally. Yeah, there's more than just an airport in Newark, right?
So it's an honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Very cool, man. Thank you for coming. Yeah, man. So before today, what was your thought of Newark? What was your preconceived notions? What did you know besides an airport?
Well, I mean, I just moved to New York a year ago from Chicago. So I'm still learning so much about New York, the city, and we live in, about Manhattan, and we live in Brooklyn, and then New Jersey is kind of it's like New Jersey is the thing I see from Manhattan, right? Like I haven't, and we have a 3-year-old daughter, so I don't have as much time to explore, and so I'm still learning about like Manhattan, New Jersey. So New Jersey, I've been through a couple times on my way, flying out of Newark and whatnot. But just there's so much to explore, so much to learn here. So I plead complete ignorance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'll give you like the elevator pitch. So Newark, New Jersey is one of the biggest cities in the state of New Jersey. And traditionally, over the last few decades, it's been kind of a rough neighborhood. It's been one of the roughest neighborhoods in the country. And over the last maybe decade, it's been going through a renaissance. And that's part of why Founders is here. We are trying to lead that technical revolution here in the city of Newark, and really use technology and entrepreneurship and innovation as vehicles to help transform the inner city here. So most recently, Audible has their headquarters here.
Really?
Yeah. Audible has a ginormous building. It's a few blocks away, and Audible has hundreds and hundreds of employees. They have about half of a building. They share the building with Rutgers Business School, but it's like over 20, 30 stories, giant building in the city of Newark.
Really?
And yeah, Audible's great, right? And Amazon is actually thinking of putting a bid here in the city of Newark. So fingers crossed. Chris Christie partnered with Democrat Cory Booker recently. They did a press statement, and they are trying to bring the first East Coast headquarters of Amazon here, because they're out in Seattle, but they're trying to have their East Coast headquarters be here in Newark, New Jersey. So fingers crossed. But that is why Founders is here. We're a social impact company, and part of that is fostering that community here in Newark.
Wow, that's cool. It's a really great space, and thanks for showing me around before we hopped on the air. It looks like you all are doing some really cool stuff here.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. I know you've been in the digital space and been an engineer for like over 10 years now, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm old. I'll be 38 next month, and I started programming when I was a kid. We had a TRS-80 computer. So
wow.
Yeah, Radio Shack TRS-80. And the first thing, the one we had, there was, of course, no internet, right? And the one we had didn't even have floppy drives. It didn't have a hard drive. Like, we had a cassette tape. Like, you plugged in cassette tapes and ran programs. And if you wanted to load a different program, you would fast forward the cassette tape to the right counter. Yeah, and that's how you store data. If you wanted to load a file, it was all like fast forwarding or rewinding to get to the point where it would read it. So, and I say that to say there wasn't a whole lot you could do on the computer that was super interesting. There weren't a lot of games to play. What you could do, though, was program. So it all shipped with BASIC. And for those of you who haven't done BASIC before, the hello world for BASIC is 10, print hello world, 20, go to 10, and then you type run. And that's it. And when you would turn on the TRS-80, it would give you a command prompt in BASIC. Like, to use a TRS-80 was to program. It was kind of a beautiful thing about computers back then, was there was a lot less distraction, and there was
and I think they were designed for makers. So maybe opposed to like an iPhone of today, totally, that it's completely locked down and they don't want you to tinker with anything. Yeah. This was like, hey, here's a motherboard. Good luck.
Totally. Yeah. Like you had to. It's actually interesting. We dug up the instruction manual for an Apple IIe recently, and we had one at the office. And the Apple IIe in the basic programming book that's teaching you how to program is also at the same time teaching you how to type on a keyboard. It doesn't say like type run. It says press the R, U, and N key, because the people who are learning to program had never used a computer before.
They've never used a keyboard.
Yeah, never used a keyboard. Yeah, and so like you think about, that was let's just call it 30 years ago. Think about how far we've come. Where on the one hand, we have so much. Everybody has a computer in their pocket today, right? On the other hand, programming feels so much less accessible, right? Like it feels, if you think about what you need to do to spin up a Node app or to spin up like a Rails app, or you think about if you wanted to teach someone to program today, they download a text editor, then download a gig or so of Python, whatever the environment is they want.
I think the privacy policy on Xcode is like more megabytes than the whole computer you were programming on, right?
Yeah, by far. Yeah, easy. So, and I say all that as like a long way of saying, I got fortunate for whatever reason. My parents, even though their professions, my dad's a pastor, my mom's a nurse, like they didn't need a computer in 1984.
Yeah.
They got one, and and I started programming, and then I just kind of kept doing it, and then I just kind of kept going at it. So I've been at Twilio now for 4 years. I was on the evangelism team for 3, and then I lead the developer community team. And then before that, I was working at a consulting company in Chicago for like 7 years, just helping like small, medium-sized businesses build websites and e-commerce shops and all sorts of different stuff there.
Very cool, very cool. And so before that, I saw that you taught a coding boot camp in 2005. Is that correct? Did they even have coding boot camps back then?
So, yeah, it's weird. It's this, I think, in retrospect, a very progressive a very progressive school called Digital Boot Camp in Chicago. And
that's amazing.
This guy's named Mike Carruth, and he just taught classes there. It was different than the boot camps
of today, obviously, right? Half the technologies didn't exist.
Yeah,
in 2005, right?
It was more like come like 2 or 3 nights a week and learn. I taught HTML and CSS, and I taught PHP. And
PHP what?
Oh man, I don't even remember. I don't know. Whatever.
Like PHP 2 or something, probably.
What are they on now?
They're on 7. They just launched 7, but like 5 was out forever.
Okay.
So it's probably like 2 or 3. That's crazy.
Man. Yeah, man, I forget. It was. It was. I mean, in retrospect, very forward thinking of them. I will say though, the first coding boot camp, dev boot camp, really made a lot of news, and they did really good work. But I, as far as I can tell, one of the first, if not the first, boot camp was a group called Code Academy, based out of Chicago.
So not the Code Academy that we know, the website.
Yeah,
different
so
company.
that's Code Academy.
Yeah.
And then, let's speak a little bit closer.
Okay.
That's Code Academy. And then these guys started off as a guy named Neil Sales Griffin, and then Mike McGee, based out of Chicago. And they started it up and did really great work. And it turned into, I can't remember what it's called. Starter School, I think. But anyway, I just say that being from Chicago, very proud. I do think that like the first, they kind of started a movement there of like, hey, come give us like 3 months, 6 months, and we'll help you change your life. So
that's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, before I saw that on your bio, I thought that the first coding boot camp was Hack Reactor, and we threw a hackathon with Twilio at the Hack Reactor campus. Shout out to those guys. But yeah, so that was my understanding. But to see that people were actually teaching coding in a boot camp style, that's amazing, man.
I mean, it's so. I went to school for 5 years and was bad at it. I failed out. I went to University of Illinois, and I failed out. And I think just really speaks to the power of coding, that you can spend a few months or a year full time or part time, whatever it is, and have it have a transformational effect on your career and on your life, right? Like it is, if you're looking to change the world today, and to have an impact on the world, I don't think there's a skill you can have that's more powerful than coding, right? Like if you're looking to change your earning potential, if you're looking to start a business, like coding opens all the doors. Yeah. Every single company, this is old, lots of folks are saying this now, but every company is a tech company now, right? And it's because you have tech companies and you have companies that didn't adopt tech and went out of business because they couldn't compete, right? Like it's like a natural, it's a survival of the fittest thing. And the companies that use tech. And so if you know how, you don't even have to be a professional developer to have an impact, right? Like we get emails, I wrote this blog post probably about a year or two ago, and it was how to send text messages from Google Spreadsheets. So Google Spreadsheets has, it's kind of hidden, but it's called ActionScript, and it's a version of JavaScript built in, and if you make a couple clicks, you can actually write some scripts in there.
Very cool.
And so it just wrote a quick script that makes an API request to Twilio, and it basically reads phone numbers from the spreadsheet, and then makes the API request, and then sends text messages to the number with the message, the body that's right next to it. I get emails almost every week from folks who are like, hey, listen, I'm not a developer, but I'm the most tech-savvy nurse in our department. And we use this to look for people to cover when someone calls in sick. Or like, I run a limo company, and we use this to coordinate with our drivers. And I'm not a developer, but like I know my way around whatever, you know? And so here are folks where they would never identify as a developer. In fact, they would identify as not a developer, but they know a little bit of code. Like they know how to copy and paste, and they're able to have a business, like an effect on their business. And they're also, you know, through that have a huge impact on their own career, right? Because like if the layoffs ever come there, they're not going to be the first to go, right? Like they're the ones taking on extra responsibility. They're the ones figuring out how to leverage a little bit of tech skill into something bigger. So, yeah, I mean, I just think like I know there's been a lot of like news about code schools and stuff, but I just really think that the idea that you can learn a little bit of code and then have a new career and start a business, whatever it is, it's just like so powerful, so incredibly powerful. So I know it's not entirely what y'all do here, but like just encouraging folks to, open up doors and to make coding as accessible today as it was 30 years ago, I think it's just so powerful.
Absolutely, man. And I love the quote that you just said, that every company needs to become a tech company or they're going to basically become extinct, go the way of the dinosaur, right? We see that every day with companies that don't innovate, companies that are failing to innovate, companies that are coming to us and asking for innovation. So not only do founders, do we work with startups and brand new companies, but we also have companies that just come to us for regular consulting.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is amazing. Like you said, a simple spreadsheet that's sending text messages can really totally revolutionize someone's business.
Yeah.
Very cool, man. So what made you want to get involved at Twilio?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had been at this consulting company. It's called Table XI in Chicago, and I'd been there for 6 or 7 years. And I had as it happens with a lot of small companies, when I started there, we were about 6 people, grew to about 30. And in those smaller companies and in consulting, you get to do a lot of different jobs, right? And so in my time there, I had done a lot of development, and then I'd also done some sales, and I'd done customer stuff. And then my last year there, I started doing a lot more writing, and then I started speaking a lot at technical conferences, giving technical talks, but also I spoke a lot about mental health stuff. And in a year or so of doing that, of getting involved in the community, I realized that out of all the stuff I had done during my 7 years there, the things I enjoyed the most were coding, first and foremost, and then speaking and writing, and then just more broadly, just serving the community. And I think that Table XI did this, their philosophy in consulting wasn't really so much sales as like, we'll come in and we will help you. And then eventually that will lead to good things, right? Like if we can just provide value early in a relationship, somewhere down the road, you'll probably pay us to solve problems, right? And so they kind of, just really fortunate, they kind of sent me out in the community. You're like, go just be of service, right? And good things will happen. So it doesn't make sense for a 30-person consulting company to have a full-time, it's basically an evangelist on staff. And so I went looking for those roles and found a job at Twilio, and that's and then I started there in February of 2014. So, and then spent basically 3 years on the evangelism team, coding, speaking, writing, and serving the developer community.
It's amazing. And so you were a developer evangelist for about 3 years, and now tell us, how did you transition and what do you do now?
Yeah, so I lead the community team. The community team and evangelism team are sister teams. Twilio has, we call it the developer network. You could think of it as developer marketing or developer outreach. Every organization calls it something a little different, but we have 3 teams tasked with serving developers. So developer evangelism, it kind of goes out in the world, and to use the etymology of evangelism, they spread the good news, right? Like they introduce people to Twilio. And I say that it's like, it's not a sales role. It is a, hey, you can send and receive text messages and buy programmable phone numbers with 5 lines of code, right? And the apps you're already building. Like, it's good news. And you know what? If that's not useful to you right now, that's fine. You know, we don't have quotas. There's no nothing. But like, it's really cool stuff. If you know, let me just show you how this works.
Well, and I think that the service is so cheap, it's like almost free.
Yeah,
that's what I tell people. This is almost free. Like, how much is a text message?
So a text message is in the U.S. is 3/4 of a penny, so 0.75 cents. Wow. And like the way we pitch it is, we want it to be effectively free while you're in development, right? Yes. And then we don't want you to be paying us real money until you're making real money.
Yes.
Right. And I think that we've done a really good job, and I say we as in Twilio, like structuring a business model so that our success is aligned with our customers.
Yes, right? Tied to the customers. As the customer scales, you know, your profits scale, and you know, if the customer has a slow month and they're not getting calls and they're not receiving text messages and they're not getting customers, then your bill is going to be lower.
Yeah, it's, you know, if you talk about, you say like getting calls, so you can do text messages and you can also do phone calls, and it's just, this is an interesting thing where if a business's phone is ringing, they're probably making money. Right. Like, you know, like phones ringing correlates with money coming.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it's a really, I think, fortunate, wise, you know, area to play in where success is aligned there. So that's the hope, right? Like most people, you can get a free trial account and it truly is free. There's some restrictions that are, you know, we'll say anytime you send a text, it says this is sent for my trial account. And so you put $20 in your account, $20 gets you 2,500 text messages, right? Like if it's just you building your thing, you'll probably never run out of 2,500 text messages.
Yeah.
Once you release it in the wild, you get customers using it, you start scaling, and then you'll start moving through it. And then, you know, our hope is always that someone just, they become a rocket ship, right? Like they become a GroupMe or an Uber, and then, you know, it's good times, right? And then, so yeah, that's our hope, is that it's free for you, effectively free in development, right? And
very cool. Yeah, so for those of our viewers, I think we're making the assumption that everyone knows what Twilio is. Fair, so for those of the people out there that don't know what is Twilio, and then a lot of our community are startups. So how can what is Twilio, and then how can startups leverage Twilio to be in communications with their customers?
Yeah, for sure. So Twilio is a cloud communications company, if you have to sum it up in a couple words. What we're best known for is an API that makes it really easy for developers to send and receive text messages and place and receive phone calls. So truly just, you can buy a programmable phone number for $1 a month. And then for just pennies, you can send and receive text messages, place and receive phone calls with just a few lines of code in whatever language you're already building your app in. So it's at its heart just a RESTful API. We also have helper libraries for probably whatever language you're working in. We probably have a helper library for it. In the last couple of years, we've also released products for video chat, and we released APIs and SDKs for text-based chat. And then we have a host of other products kind of around communications. But those would be the ones that we're best known for.
Very cool. So we do have a question from Adam. He said, when you first started out, and I assume we're talking about Twilio here, how were you able to host all of the free user accounts on the free tier? So how does that go into your bottom line? You guys are giving away all of these free services. How is that sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of Silicon Valley companies, that they raised money.
They raised money.
Yeah. So, and I think that,
well, now you guys have IPO'd, right? You guys IPO'd last year.
About last year we IPO'd. So I think too that, you know, the free tier is, again, it's a kind of a free trial. So if you sign up for it, you can build your app, but you're going to see something in there that says sent from my trial account.
Powered by Twilio, or sent from a Twilio account.
You probably want to get
rid of that.
And it costs like $20 too, right? And so from the first day that our customers deployed apps to production, we were making revenue, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's kind of a big difference from a lot of other companies, is that revenue started right away. People can send and receive and play around the service for free. But then, you know, as soon as they start using the thing, then Twilio started making money.
Absolutely. Very cool. Yeah, so you just talked about the video API, and off camera right before we started, I was telling you that the video API kind of changed my life a little bit.
Yeah, and I got really excited. Tell me about that.
And I was like, no, we got to do it on the internet, right? Yeah, totally. So yeah, your video API literally changed the trajectory of my life. So Rob Spector, who I think he's one of the original OGs over at Twilio.
He was there for a very long time.
Very long time. So he did a meetup in New York City when the video API was in private beta. No, it wasn't even in private beta. It was like, wasn't even released yet.
Yeah.
And they did an email blast and they were like, hey, there's this new video API. It's amazing. You need to come check it out. Where if you want to play with this API, come to this meetup. So I shoot into the city after work and I go to this meetup, and there's beer and there's food and there's a bunch of hackers, right? So what could go wrong? And they created a video chat app live in front of us in like 15, 20 minutes, right? And the one dude goes in the phone in the bathroom on a phone, and they're on shitty Wi-Fi, but they got it to work, and they literally, with a few lines of code, built a video chat app. And I go up to Rob after the event, had never met them, had played a little bit with Twilio, had used your text messaging, but never the video. And I said, dude, this is awesome. How do I get the private beta? Like, let me get an API key. And he said, great, if you want an API key, come to California to our Signal Developer Conference. And so I was like, all right, cool. They're like, great. And so I flew out, and I don't think he was expecting me to do that.
Yeah.
I get off of the shuttle from the airport, and a bunch of Twilio employees in red Twilio shirts are screaming at the top of their lungs for the attendees when they came off the shuttle bus. So we get off the shuttle bus, and Rob's there with the whole team, screaming. And he's like, dude, what the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? You really came from New York? And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm passionate. Like, shit is awesome. I want an API key, right? So that was my first trip ever to Silicon Valley.
Wow.
I had never been to Silicon Valley. When I was learning how to program, there was no Google headquarters in New York. I always say this. There was no Twitter headquarters in New York. And that scene, forget Newark or New Jersey. I lived in Jersey. But even in Manhattan, there was no developer community out here in Manhattan. So going to Silicon Valley and seeing Uber billboards everywhere and innovative tech companies like trialing their services. There was something called Curbside, which now is everywhere, where like if you can buy something at Target and they'll bring it to the curb. But like they were trying that in beta there, and like just this whole city of just innovation really changed my perspective. And so there was a keynote speech, and it was one of the founders of Y Combinator. It was a VP from Twitter. It was the author of the Lean Startup, and I think like one other person. It was a panel. And one of the founders of Y Combinator gets up on stage. They were talking about the tech shortage, how there are more people that want to build things than people that know how to actually build them. And he gets up on stage and he says, all you people, when you go back to Ohio or New Jersey or New York or Chicago, wherever the hell you're from, go ask your boss for a raise. And so I went back, I asked my boss for a raise, I got it. Wow. But then still like 6 months later I left and I started working for a digital agency. So it definitely changed the trajectory of my life. Wow. I go out to Twilio Signal every year. Now I equate it to like my trip to the motherland. And it really just opened my eyes to the world of software, of the things that you guys preach, like being a technology first company and, using technology and software to like be an innovator and being a disruptor and using it as a vehicle to communicate with your customers. Like a lot of the things that you guys even talk about in your keynote, like, yeah, you could use Twilio services to accomplish that thing, but a lot of them are more ideological. And yeah, that vibe and that energy really empowered me to really change the trajectory of my career.
That's so encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So cool to hear.
Yeah, man. So yeah, thank you guys for doing all the good work that you guys do.
Oh man, I mean, and you brought that back, right? Because you started up this Twilio meetup in New York, and actually we just announced it last week, but we are doing it's not quite Twilio Signal, but it's called Twilio Engage. It's a kind of like a Twilio roadshow. So
Nice.
Here in New York at the end of the month. So we're going to have speakers for about 2 hours in the morning, talking probably a little more high level. But then in the afternoon, we just launched this thing called Twilio Quest. If you want to learn Twilio, it's probably the best way to learn Twilio. It's a video game that our developer education team built, and you earn experience points by completing Twilio challenges, and you get to it's all 8-bit graphics that you get to level up your character. When you complete challenges, you can equip your character with different tools. Like just go to
it's like Zelda for Twilio, essentially.
Exactly.
We won't tell Zelda; they're not on our
right. Yeah, so check out Twilio Quest. We'll be playing it all afternoon with people who work at Twilio, like in the room to assist. If you want to learn more, the training covers all of the products, and it's just a choose your own adventure. Like whatever product you want to learn more about, whatever challenge you want to complete, you can go deep or you can go wide, and people will be there to help. So that's going to be in New York on November 30th. And you can find it at twilioengage.com. And the full afternoon of training, I think, costs $99, and the morning session's free.
Very cool.
So yeah, I think more than anything, it's just going to be a community of developers. And then that afternoon or that evening, we're going to have Bash, which is the after party.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a party for developers. So there's code challenges and a lot of it's a lot of like, I don't know, it's a party created by developers for developers.
Yeah, it's very fun. So I've been to all the bashes in San Francisco, and they're tons of fun.
Yeah.
I went this year, and they had not Super Nintendo, regular Nintendo, the original Mario, and they were playing it on a giant 50-inch projector in the background, and you could text in and glitch the game. So you would basically send in a text message and send in certain codes, and it would literally glitch the game in real time. The other interesting thing that you guys released at Signal was the SIM cards.
Yeah.
So now the SIM cards, and again, this stuff is like, it's almost free. It's so dirt cheap. So the Twilio SIM cards are $2 a month.
Yeah.
And the minutes are like just as cheap. It's the same rates.
I don't remember exact pricing, but it's pretty inexpensive.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's like almost the same rates. And basically for $2 a month, you can have a SIM connected card. So that means you can just start throwing SIM cards in everything.
Yeah.
In, bikes, like city bikes. I saw some people using it for that, in drones, in Wi-Fi cameras. Like you can just start throwing SIM cards in everything that used to be tethered to Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And now all these Internet of Things, these things are like coming alive.
Yeah.
So that's super exciting.
Pretty excited about that. Yeah, it's called Twilio Wireless, and we just want to put Twilio in the hands of hardware hackers. It's
very cool.
Yeah, just make it super easy for you to take your hardware hack and give it a data connection.
That's amazing.
We say this often. We can't wait to see what people build with that. It's just, I think that's been one of the fun things about Twilio, right? It's like you build. I've only been in the company for about 4 years now. The company's been around about 8 years, so they build this API that just lets you send and receive text messages, right? But it's that's a very simple functionality, and we are constantly blown away by how people use that and the cool just every day surprised by, I can't believe they built that thing with that. Like it's just it's incredibly cool.
Well, that's one of the other inspiring things about going to Signal every year is seeing the doer stories. Yeah. So similar to Founders, for those of you who don't know, has a nonprofit. Founders started out as a nonprofit. So we have a 501c3. And then in addition to that, we have a for-profit corporation. And Twilio also has Twilio.org, which does all these nonprofit initiatives. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about some of the cool things people built with Twilio?
Yeah, so Twilio.org will give $500 in free credit to any 501c3, and then a 25% discount on any rack rates going forward. So it's again, you talk about $20, 2,500 text messages, $500 lasts a long time, and then getting the discount from there on out is a pretty big deal. So Twilio.org has just a ton of really cool success stories. So I think one of the ones that's been the biggest over the last year. I think we often see seasonal stuff. So since the election, we've seen a lot of people using Twilio to contact the representatives. Like, as it turns out, this is one of the things that, aside from today, I have my I voted sticker on, aside from actually voting once a year, contacting your reps is one of the things that you can do that actually does have
an impact,
right? Like, they see that. It can be difficult to figure out who exactly should you call, like what's the number. Yeah. We got a guy named Ian Webster in the community. He's based in California, and he worked with DeRay McKesson from Black Lives Matter, and they created a hotline where you can call and punch in your zip code, and then it will sequentially connect you with your 3 representatives. And so, you punch in your zip code, it says, okay, we're going to put you in touch with this person. It gives you a little kind of script of what you should say. And then, it does your 2 senators and then your congressman, and you just have to stay on the line, right?
Wow.
So you can give one phone number to the entire country, right? As opposed to, you're thinking about like 560 some numbers that people would have to look up. So it's also useful. There's another, you mentioned Eric Rees from Lean Startup. He's been behind something called ResistBot, which is doing very similar stuff. They attack it a little differently. There you can, there's several different ways you can connect your representatives. One of the cooler ways they've done it is earlier this year, we launched an API for fax. And so you can text the short code, and you can text, and it'll walk you through some questions about where you live, and so they can figure out who your reps are. Then you can text it your message, and ResistBot will send a fax on your behalf.
So amazing.
To your reps, right? Because we deal with, it's actually been really interesting. Ian, who has the Call Congress hotline, has done some interesting analysis, especially on when big stuff's going down around, he can tell you by looking at the data who answers their phone, right? He can say these reps their phones are always busy, or like these reps are more likely to have a person answer or have get the voicemail, right? Wow. And then for a while, it was actually interesting. I talked to someone who does some lobbying a few months ago, and she's like, one problem actually this year is the fact that the citizens are so engaged and empowered. Yeah. I mean, I think Twilio has helped not
empower a lot of people.
Yeah. Some of this, a lot is happening. It has nothing to do with Twilio, right? But it's been really cool.
No, but Twilio is a tool that can be used to create these things.
Yeah, and it's been really cool because I think what in this case, and we've seen this in several different arenas, but you have developers who genuinely want to help, right? I think that's been one of the hardest parts of the last year, is that there's been a lot of folks who have felt disempowered, right? Like, you just felt like there's nothing we can do. And then there's been some developers who have been able to build tools. Some of those tools use Twilio, some don't. But again, going back to, if you want to have an impact on the world, right? Like Ian Webster writes some code and allows, he ends up powering over 10,000 calls to Congress, right? ResistBot, because they end up finding that the phone lines end up getting busy, and this lobbyist was saying one of the problems is that I can't actually get through to the representatives to lobby for the things I want to lobby because the citizens are calling so much. How awesome is that, right? Like, the lobbyists,
we're blocking the lobbyists, right? That's amazing.
It was harder to get someone on the line. So the phone lines are getting jammed. So ResistBot's sending faxes, right? And so that's been, I think political activism.
So it's interesting that you bring that up. You just reminded me. So when Donald Trump first came into office, he was signing the executive orders, and there was the JFK ban. And me and a bunch of hackers from Rutgers Coding Bootcamp went to JFK as part of No Ban, and we created an SMS bot to help the lawyers.
That's awesome.
And so basically what was happening was people were coming from other countries, and if they were here on a visa, again, these people are legally allowed to come into the country with visas and green cards, they were being denied at the border and being detained. Wow. And these lawyers were volunteering and saying, whoever they didn't even know who it is. As soon as they saw the people being detained, they were like, oh, that's my client. I'm taking that person on as a client. And that's how the lawyers were fighting back. Wow. So we went and teamed up and joined forces with the lawyers and basically sent SMS notifications out to all the lawyers who were in all the different terminals, what terminal they should be at and when.
Wow.
And and we went and we threw a little mini hackathon at JFK. So cool. And man. So, and it empowered us. This was something that happened spur of the moment. In the middle of the night. We heard people were going to JFK, and we said, cool, we want to go and we want to be engaged. And as long as we had Wi-Fi and our text editors, we were able to make an impact.
Isn't that so crazy?
Yeah.
It's so powerful. Just what you can do today. There's a group they have a product called Good Call. Okay. And they piloted it in the Bronx to help folks who have recently been arrested. So imagine this, right? So you get arrested and they take away your phone, and you should be allowed one phone call, right? Mm-hmm.
but you're not. Sometimes.
So, yeah, for sure. Sometimes you're not. Let's say you even get your phone call. Who do you call? How many phone numbers do you know? Like, I know my wife's phone number, and that's about it, right? Like, and they won't give you access to your phone. They won't let you look up in your contacts. And so a lot of folks, the difference between them making bail, or the difference between them actually even getting
a lawyer, getting anything,
like the difference between them. I mean, they have
difference between freedom and imprisonment.
Yeah, right. Because they're in prison for like 4 or 5 months awaiting trial, right? And so they're saying, if you can just get a hold of the right person, whether that's a lawyer or whether that's someone in the community, like in some cases, it's even just to prove that you have ties to the community and so you're not a flight risk, and the judge will give you bail. Yeah. Otherwise, if you can't prove that, then they won't give you bail. You're stuck awaiting trial for months, right? And so then you lose your job, you might lose custody of your kids, you might lose your house, right? All because, and there is this window where if you can get the right person on the line, then you can, I mean, literally change the trajectory of your life, right? And of course, this like whole system is like totally disproportionately unfair to people who don't have money, right? And so these folks created, I think it's one. I could be wrong about this. You should look this up before you go to jail. But it's like 1-888-GOOD-CALL or something like that. It's an easy to remember number, and you call it, and they have kind of a phone tree to help. You can call it ahead of time if you want to like put your emergency contacts in there in case you're ever in this situation. Wow. But they will route you to a public defender and help you find legal representation and whatnot. And their hope is to eventually get this number posted in, at police stations and get it closer. But in the meantime, they're doing a whole bunch of like marketing.
Grassroots,
yeah. But it's like one phone number for you to know, in the same way that like Ian Webster's thing is call one phone number and be connected with all your reps. It's like just remember this one phone number. And if you're ever in the shitty situation, like hopefully we can get you out of it in a way that, can have a profound impact on people's lives. And so they're using Twilio to do that.
Absolutely. It's amazing. There was another story that I saw at a Signal where in parts of, I believe, Africa, where there's no internet access and even no radio. So there are places where there's no news and no radio, but there is cell reception for not data, but regular cell reception. People created phone numbers that you could dial in and listen to the news and dial in and listen to the radio. So yeah, it really is. And again, I don't think Twilio maybe even could have imagined that use case. But the fact that it exists and the fact that it's so flexible and so programmable really is amazing.
I don't know if it's the same talk, but Precious Lunga at Signal one year talked about how in some parts of Africa they're using, I think it's in Zimbabwe, they had doctors who were giving medical advice over SMS to people in rural communities where they just don't have access to a doctor, right? And so if you think about SMS, I've heard it described as the only app that's installed on every phone.
Yes.
Right. It doesn't matter what kind of phone you have. If you own a cell phone today, it has SMS on it. And so it is in many ways the easiest way to make your app mobile. It requires no UI, like you don't have to mess with JavaScript, right? Or you don't have to mess with
CSS anything,
or with Java or with Kotlin or with Swift, you don't have to deploy it to a store, right? Like if somebody has a phone, they can interact.
If they have if you have their phone number, you can communicate with them.
Yeah.
They can. It doesn't matter if it's Android, BlackBerry. Yeah.
And that's really powerful, right? Like we've seen some really cool stuff happen from that. So, it's really I think just really a testament to developers and the incredible power that they have when you give them simple tools and simple building blocks, what they can create with those things.
Absolutely. That also reminds me of another philanthropic project that we worked at Rutgers Coding Bootcamp. We partnered with a nonprofit called Community Access, and we built again a hotline where you could text in your zip code and it would reply with the nearest available shelter.
Oh wow!
So it would do that for people in New York City.
That's awesome.
And then we deployed that, and basically anyone. Community Access is they're kind of like a halfway house. But they do have limitations in their capacity, and it's more of a long-term solution as opposed to a homeless shelter, which is like a one-night kind of solution. So yeah, so we created that directory for them so that they can text in and actually get access to
That's awesome.
Homeless shelters.
That's so cool. And that's something you did at a hackathon?
Yeah, we did this at a boot camp. Like, took us a couple weeks.
And it's still running?
Yeah, and it's still running.
So cool.
And, yeah.
That's been a surprising thing since joining Twilio is how many useful Twilio apps you can build over the course of a day or two, and then they just kind of run, right? Like they're actually pretty simple. Some are, right? Like my wife and I tried for a long time to get like our personal finances under control. We tried like Mint and we tried different things, and everything's kind of heavy-handed. I ended up using a Google spreadsheet and then a Twilio app on top of it.
Okay.
I ended up using Python for it. So I wrote a blog post about using Python and Google Sheets together, and it's actually really simple. And I think once you get it to go, pretty powerful. But so I just text my Twilio number and I just say like $2.67 and then a category. So like Greg. So it was like my money miscellaneous, yeah, and then like coffee, and so it's like amount, category, description, and I built the thing 4 or 5 months ago, and it just runs. Like it's on like a $5 Heroku plan, and it just kind of runs and it dumps it into a spreadsheet, and then I can like play with the data and do whatever I want with it. And this is the first thing that worked, I think, in part because I built it, and I prefer building as a developer, prefer building stuff instead of using stuff other people built, but I could build exactly what I wanted, and it's really simple app,
Well, and I think the amazing thing with like cloud computing, and again, I started becoming a developer when cloud computing wasn't really a thing. Like I remember when S3 came out, and that was cool. It was like, oh, S3, and that's not even logic in the cloud. That was just storage. But yeah, with cloud computing now, you can again write a little snippet of code and just have it scale infinitely. And you guys just released a product that actually helps people do that. Twilio Functions. That
was a big, not a big, but it was a stumbling block for a lot of times. Like, so the way Twilio works, the way the SMS voice products work is that when someone calls your programmable phone number, Twilio makes an HTTP request to an endpoint that you set up, right? And so you would drop into the console, you say, this is the URL that I want you to make the HTTP request to. And in that request would be information about the incoming text message or phone call. So it'd be like let's just say for a text, it'd be the from number is this, the body of the message is this, would be the ones you typically look at. So you'd have to prop up a server somewhere to handle that request. And if you've done any web development, this is probably not a big deal. You probably have a web server plan somewhere, how to deploy stuff, but it is an extra step. Especially when
it's an extra fault point, right?
100%.
You can throw it on a server, and 6 months later, if you canceled that server plan, and now boop, there your Twilio app stopped working, and you can't figure it out why.
Or you forget to install the security update that month because
it gets hacked.
So we deployed functions, which is basically think of as Lambda functions in the Twilio console. So you can write JavaScript functions, and now your Twilio apps are deployed on Twilio infrastructure. So you no longer have to also set up infrastructure in order to build Twilio apps. You can just do it on our infrastructure, and we'll take care of the scaling. We'll take care of the making sure things stay up.
So my mom is a former computer programmer in another life.
Really?
Yes. So my mom was a COBOL developer in the early 90s. Yeah.
That's awesome.
She worked for Painweber, and she's kind of the one that taught me how to code at an early age. I didn't have a, what computer was that?
TRS-80.
I didn't have a TRS-80, but I had a DOS computer, and I was like in second grade. I don't remember. But yeah, so I had a DOS computer when I was a kid, and she kind of taught me how to program and then stopped programming. Like, she's not a coder now, but she's definitely a hacker and a tinkerer, and she's the one that told me about Twilio.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Really?
She told me about Twilio back when you guys were like still a startup. I don't even think you could do calling. I think it was just texting at the time. Wow. And she was like, yeah, check out this thing. It's called Twilio. And as always, like, I ignored her the first time she said it. Same thing. She told me about Uber too. The same. Yeah. My mom's really cool. Yeah. But yeah, so she told me about Twilio, and she used Twimlets.
Yeah.
So she built things. Again, she's not a super developer. She knows how to make websites and stuff. But
if she was a COBOL developer, I think that classifies as super developer.
Yeah, she's kind of a rock star. Yeah, a little bit. But but she was using Twimlets, and then I told her about functions, and I was like, hey, you should look into deploying stuff on functions. I've done it a few times, and it's amazingly simple. Like, I feel like there are regular human beings that are not developers that will be able to use functions, and there are built-in little things to get you started.
Yeah. They have templates in there. So there's a handful of very common use cases with Twilio. So an IVR, which is interactive voice response, like
press 1 for sales, press 2 for marketing, etc.
Yeah. So that's a super common one. A business puts that up. You can just forward to, say, different people's cell phones or whatever.
An IVR for SMS.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you can do like very simple
text in sales, and then we'll text you back a flyer or something.
Or one really common use case is like call tracking or lead tracking. So this might be relevant since a lot of folks here are perhaps running like marketing budgets, right? There's the saying 50% of marketing dollars are wasted. We just never know what 50%, right? And so the idea behind lead tracking is, imagine, do you ever watch Breaking Bad?
Yes.
Okay, so like Better Call Saul, right? He's got his he runs
big banner ad on the side of the road.
Yeah, so he's got
Better Call Sal.
He's got a banner on the side of the road. He's got his ad on a bench. He's got the back page of the phone book. The problem.
How do you calculate the ROI?
Totally. That's exactly right. Like, is that when a phone call comes in and the receptionist answers the line, she doesn't know which ad they saw, right? And so it's very possible that one of those is generating 80% of the return, but he has no way of knowing. And so what you do with lead tracking is, for $1 a month, you buy a phone number and you put a different phone number on each advertisement. So you might put it on your print ads or your phone book or your billboard, and then like your Google ads, right? And so you have or different campaigns. And then when somebody calls that number, Twilio makes the HTTP request to your server. And before you forward the phone to whoever needs to answer the phone, you increment a counter somewhere. And so a lot of people do this in Google Analytics. A lot of people might have other marketing software they use. Maybe it's just a Google spreadsheet. But you basically just put a tick mark next to that phone number. Yeah. And then at the end of the month, you can see which ads generated how many calls, and you can use that to figure out how do you reallocate your marketing budget. Right? And so that's just something really simple you can do. Just imagine if a phone number only cost you $1, like all the different fun things you could do with it, right?
Just buy a bunch of phone numbers for every billboard that you put up. Yeah. And then you have like real-time Google Analytics plugged into a fucking billboard that's made out of paper.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of marketplaces, like online marketplaces, where you're finding, different service providers, and they'll use Twilio for routing those calls and making sure that, and basically being able to say back to the person who's listening to the marketplace, hey, this is how many calls you got via, or like, another really common use case is, say, like Airbnb will use us for what we probably call like anonymous communications. So if you run a marketplace and you want your sellers, your buyers and sellers, to communicate through you. Right. So like, you don't want
you want them to call each other,
yeah,
but only when they're using your platform.
You don't want them to take the transaction off your platform for numerous reasons.
For safety.
Exactly.
And
and for your own, personal, business, health of your business reasons, but for safety, you want to make sure they're not like sending each other credit card numbers through your service, right? Or like you might want to screen out certain information.
Absolutely.
So they use this for that. So for instance, when you call your Lyft driver, you're calling an Uber number. You're calling a Twilio number.
Twilio number.
Yeah. And that way they can then pair up the two people in the conversation, and then when that transaction, that ride is over.
If you call back the Lyft driver tomorrow,
you're not calling their cell phone.
You're not calling their cell phone.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
There's a lot of stuff like that. I will share, just since it's a lot of entrepreneurs on here, I want to share one of my favorite stories that use this use case of Twilio. And you probably saw him. Do you remember seeing Ryan Leslie speaking at Signal?
Yeah, Superphone, man. Yeah. He's actually really, really good friends of Gerard, one of the founder of Founders.
Really?
And I think they're speaking on a panel.
Oh, no kidding.
Next month or something.
Okay.
Yeah, right. but totally. But tell the story.
Yeah. So Ryan Leslie is a Grammy-nominated hip hop artist and musician, and he puts out his first album, and after he had, I think, interned with Puff Daddy, who I learned yesterday is now Love, It says he changed his name to Love or Brother Love, I think. Look it up, it's true. And so he would not respond to Puff Daddy. But anyway, he interns with him for quite some time, puts out his first album. His first album sells, I think he said like 60,000 copies or something. Puts out his second album, sales are lagging. He goes to his label and he says, hey,
the first time we sold X amount of copies of records, why are we not selling this many this time?
And he says specifically, there's 60,000 people who purchased that first record. Why don't we just market to those people again? Why don't we just tell them like, hey, I got a new album out? And they're like, we don't know who those people are. Which is like,
crazy.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like a huge company.
Yeah. And he starts to realize, he's building a following on Twitter. He's building a following on Facebook, but he doesn't own those platforms and that can be taken away from him. So he discovers Twilio. He's not a coder, but he goes and teaches himself how to code. He teaches himself Ruby on Rails so that he can build Superphone. And now if you look up Ryan Leslie on Twitter, on the top of his header, it has a phone number. And that's the phone number he gives out at every concert that he's at. He gives it out every time he does an interview. And he, as of a year and a half ago, had over 70,000 fans text this number. And that is the phone number, the same phone number that his mom texts to get a hold of him. Like he uses it. So he basically built what he called Superphone. And it's a way for him to have, you can think of it as like a lightweight CRM that allows him to communicate with his fans. But then he's also able to then track other data about his fans. Did they buy my last album? What city are they in? So if he's going to put on a show in Chicago, he can text his fans. I heard this awesome story that he went out to LA to record new tracks. And he was going to record, it was going to cost him, this number's probably wrong, but the story I heard was like, it was going to cost like $8,000 for the day of like recording time. And so he pulls up Superphone and he sends a text to all of his fans who are out in LA and says, hey, recording never before heard tracks. If you want to hear them and come hang out in the studio for the day, here's a link to his Shopify store, $500. Spend the day with me tonight. I'll take everyone out to drinks when we're all done. In like 5 minutes, sell 16 tickets, pays for a studio for the day, right?
Oh, so, that's so sick.
Yeah. So it says, text message is the most intimate form of electronic communication. You think about who you text with, right? Like, and you think about like if you send me a Twitter message or like a DM or send me an email, I'll probably see it today, right? If you send me a text message, I will see it right now, right? And I will probably reply. 99% SMS has like a 99% open rate. And so you think about him, he's figured out how to use the most intimate form of communication. And when we were talking about getting him to Signal, sure enough, I sent him a couple emails, no reply. Friday night, like 11
You text the Superphone.
I text the Superphone. It was like 11 on a Friday, and he hits me back. He's like, yeah, man, I'd love to be there. So he uses it, and it's a really cool form of just engaging his customers.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's such a great story. It's such a
great
story.
He's a great, he's an inspiration. If you ever look up Ryan Leslie.
Look up his Signal Talk. It's on YouTube.
Yeah. Talk, look, anytime you hear him speak, like he's just inspirational. Talk about someone who just taught himself
to code.
Yeah. And it's changing the music industry and the way that musicians and artists connect with their fans.
That's so cool, man. It's super awesome. Yeah, it reminds me of another story, another Twilio success story, but I can't remember it right now. But we have another question. Yeah. So it says, how do I use Twilio for education? I live in South Africa, and to get information out to rural areas is very difficult. How do those who don't have internet access get connected?
Yeah, so first off, we need to just check on the website and just see what our availability is in different countries.
Per country.
Yeah, per country. So
you guys are in a lot of countries though, right?
Yeah, we just rolled out, we have phone numbers, local phone numbers in over 100 countries now.
Okay. So, but make sure that your country in Africa is covered.
Yeah.
But if they
are, so you would buy a phone number and then you just got to figure out how do you market that phone number, right? So that's if you're talking about how do we get people to text this number, when we're talking about the SMS product, everything happens through a programmable phone number. So you buy a phone number, you can search for phone numbers that are, easier to remember or they're catchy or whatever. But ultimately it's just like, wherever it is that you see phone numbers exist, whether that's printing them out on flyers or whatever that is, you just have to figure out how do you get phone numbers in the hands of folks. I think there's also one cool thing about text messaging is there often is kind of a viral component to it, right? Like if the service is useful, people will share that. If it's useful and it's simple, people will share that with other folks because the barrier to use it is so low.
Yeah, it's just like text this number and you will get educational tips. Text this number and you will get X, Y, and Z. Yeah, so I would say to answer Dave's question is, again, first and foremost, make sure that your country is serviced. Hopefully it is. They're in over 100 countries. And then, yeah, using it as a medium to distribute communication. And distribute communication where there is no internet access. You could create a bot, and I think I've actually seen this, so the code probably exists, you just have to fork it. You could create a bot that searched the internet for you. So you could text in a query. You could say, hey, text this number if you need some information. And you could text in the query and have the bot just reply with the text versions of websites, or Wikipedia, right? You could create a Wikipedia-enabled SMS line where you could text in a query and it could return the information that's on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
So there's just so many ways to like bridge the gap and the barrier.
Yeah, and if you need help, I'm gb@twilio.com. Like, just drop me an email and we'll help you navigate that and see if we can figure that out. We also just launched. It's not publicly available yet, but our big announcement at Signal London a couple of months ago was Twilio Studio, which is a drag and drop interface for building Twilio apps. And so the hope there is just to enable folks who
empower more people that don't know how to code to use this drag and drop editor to create their own things.
Yeah, exactly. And also you can drag and drop and kind of fork the logic. And then you can also say, okay, at this point in the process, I want you to drop down and use Twilio functions to do this thing. So if you do know how to code, it's also helpful. Like
just to build your workflows.
Yeah, developers can go deep with it, and then non-developers can build
business logic.
Yeah, exactly. And people can collaborate on it. So that's still in developer preview, so it's not fully available yet. But keep an eye out for it. It'll be hopefully in the coming months will be available.
Very cool. So we have another question from Nick. Hey, shout out to Nick. Nick, what's up, man? He was here on last Founders Friday.
That's awesome.
So Nick is asking, do you have any programs that give startup discounts? So I want to know the answer to this as well. We have partnerships right now with SendGrid, with HubSpot, and a lot of other companies that give like a 90% discount or give certain types of credits. So did you guys offer startup discounts? He says, I really want to incorporate it into my new tech startup, Fantaz Tech, and have it incorporated with our web app and our iPhone app, which is coming soon.
Yeah, we don't have a formal program, but just drop me an email, gb@twilio, and we'll figure out something and help you out. We're always happy to help people get started on that.
Yeah, you guys are pretty liberal with startup credits, right? And then for nonprofits, there is a $500 thing that they apply for if they have a nonprofit.
That's exactly right. So for nonprofits, you just go to twilio.org, you'll find a sign-up form there, and then you just go through the application process, you get $500.
Very cool. So I do have one quick Twilio story I want to get in here, and I'll be quick with it. So have you ever heard of an app called Relay Rides?
Relay Rides.
Okay, so it rebranded recently about a year ago. It's now called Turo. Okay, so Turo is essentially Airbnb for cars.
Okay.
So you have your car. If you're not using it, you can put it on Turo, even if you are using it, and you can say, okay, you want to drive my Mercedes, you want to even drive my Honda, give me $50 a day and you can drive my Honda. So the company launched as Relay Rides. They launched on TechCrunch, and I read an article, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I downloaded it, took a picture of my car. I have like a late model black Lexus, kind of cool looking car. But I drove it to work every day. But I put the price, and I was like $200 a day. I was like, listen, if you want to give me $200 a day, I'll take the bus. I'll take an Uber, right? So I put like, I think $175 or $200 a day, and I put it up on the app. And then as time goes on and you get a new phone or you clean out your phone, I had uninstalled their app. So it's 6 months to a year later. I'm in the conference room with one of my old companies. We're in the middle of a meeting. I look at my my smartwatch, and I have a text message, and it says, John would like to rent your Lexus for $175 a day for 3 days, and the total is, $600. Reply yes to accept. And I'm like, what? I was like, yeah. And I barely even remember what app this was or what I had downloaded, but I replied yes. And then I went and I downloaded the app again, and I logged back in. And then I rented the guy the car, and my car's famous. It was in a commercial.
Really?
The guy rented my car to be in a commercial, right?
That's awesome.
Like, who cares? But the most important part, the cool part, is the company leveraged Twilio to regain a customer that they had essentially lost. As a customer, I uninstalled their app.
Yeah.
I may or may not have checked my email. I wasn't going to their website to check, but they were able to send me essentially a push notification and make me aware that someone was ready to do business with me. So I really love that. I love that ability to really connect and allow people to do business with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I believe when Uber originally started, it was actually, when it was first just black cars, it was just text.
It was all SMS.
Yeah, it was all SMS. And so I think there's also, when you're just getting started, the constraints of 140 characters or 160 characters of a text message, and that being your interface is a really powerful constraint that can help you start getting feedback and like ship your app and have your map be mobile accessible without actually getting lost in a lot of the decisions that come with shipping a mobile app, right? And so you can start getting feedback in the world and iterate quickly on the business model without going down the pigeonhole of shipping an Android app and an iOS app. It's a really powerful way to get started. Yeah,
it lets you kind of skip the App Store review. In a way.
Yeah, and at some point, you'll probably want to have that, depending on what your business is. But for folks who are just getting started, you're talking about you just want to get feedback quickly and iterate quickly. It's a really great way to just kick things off.
Absolutely. And once you do have an app, Twilio also offers APIs that will integrate with mobile apps as well. You have like a push notification service. You guys have like Sync now that does like Facebook Messenger and all this crazy stuff. And you can have all that stuff in one kind of ecosystem.
Totally, yeah.
So it's really cool. The WebRTC chat, you can do like video calling. You can do voice calling in the browser, which is really cool. So there's all this other cool communication stuff that you can do if you want to build a full-fledged app. But like you said, if you want to have your MVP and you just want to go to market and you just want to communicate with your customers, SMS is a super powerful tool. And it's affordable. So to Nick, who was asking for startup discounts, like I'm sure Greg will hook it up with some credits, but those credits are going to go really far because this stuff is really cheap.
Yeah. And with chat, I think we're probably moving more towards a world where folks have their preferred channels where they want to meet. Like I'm like I said, I'm old, so I'm not really on like Facebook Messenger a whole lot. Like I tend to prefer SMS these days, right? Someone who's 10 years younger than me might not be the case, right? Or someone else might be more on WhatsApp. And so product we have called Notify, the idea is that we will help you connect to the right customer on the right channel using a single API call. So we get to a place where you say, like, I just want to send this message to Tony. Twilio, you figure out how to do that, right? And then they go from there. And then like we'll handle all the logic and figure out what's the best channel for this person.
Yeah, because the worst thing is like when you buy something on Amazon and it ships and you get a text message, an email, push notification. So Notify will figure out the right channel to notify that person. Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah, some fun stuff.
Totally. And so you guys are having, when is your New York City Signal Light?
November 30th in Manhattan. So go to twilioengage.com or just Google Twilio Engage. You can find all the details there, but it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I would love for Founders to be there. And then in addition to that, we're having an event like the week after.
Oh, really?
So we're having our fundraiser for our nonprofit, and that's going to be December 9th or December 8th, and then December 9th and 10th, we're having Eric Thomas fly in, and we're going to have like a 2-day event, mastermind workshop, and it's going to be tons of fun. So yeah, I think those are going to be some fun two weeks. That's kind of back to back. Yeah, definitely. Well, Greg, I mean, thank you so much for coming.
This is an honor to be here. Thank you. This is a lot of fun. It's a really cool community that you built. It is not easy. There's so much opportunity for distraction. Like there's so much, so many options of how folks, divide their attention online. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you've been able to build this community that you have is just, I think, a great indicator, not only of the content that you're providing folks, but just like your heart, right? You can tell that you're doing this out of a desire to see people succeed. And I think people can tell that. And so it's just a really cool thing you built here, and I appreciate letting us be a small part of it.
Thank you, man. Likewise, man. Dude, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Peace. If you guys want more information, we're going to drop some links in the description. Later.